I'm going to start with a story this evening. I was 22 years old, standing in the hallway outside a hospital room, about to do my very first hospital visitation. I was visiting Pat Adams, who was my church hero. She was this warrior, badass, love filled, inspirational matriarch. During her long life as a church leader, she had taken care of everyone else. And now, as that life was nearing its end, it was time for her church to give back. And I, as incoming chair of the Caring Connection Committee, was going to do the best deathbed visit ever. I'd done my research. Googling how to talk to dying people had not proved particularly fruitful, so I had asked my then fiance, Gary, who worked with cancer patients, for advice as he was dropping me off at the hospital. He had said that sometimes dying people do want to talk about death, and it's good to be there and listen, but that mostly it was important to follow Pat's lead. I don't know about her lead, I said. She asked me to bring the minutes of the Karen Connection meeting that she missed. What does that mean? Well, I hope you brought them, Gary said, laughing. And so now I stood outside Pat's hospital room, running over potential opening sentences in my mind. Maybe casual and funny, a story about how hard it had been to find the room, or spiritual and calm. Maybe a traditional opening like, how are you? But with this subtle, deep emphasis like, how are you? Do you want some lunch? Pat called out to me, interrupting my deliberations. She was peeking around the curtain and waving me in. I stumbled into the room, perched on a visitor's chair, and looked at the meal tray that she was pointing to. A lone aluminum can sat on the tray, and she sat smirking at it. What is that? I asked. It's Ensure, she said. You can have it. She wrinkled her nose. I finally dropped a few pounds, and they don't like it, so they're feeding me this. What kind of idiot tries to fatten someone up with liquid meal replacement? You should ask your cancer doctor fiance if they've ever heard of cheesecake. Well, I could run out and get you some. I began to offer, but Pat just laughed. I'm not hungry, she said. Cancer keeps you from feeling hungry sometimes. I held my eyes carefully still so they wouldn't widen when she said the word cancer. This was the lead in that I had thought might appear. I was determined to provide her with a safe space. Do you want to talk about death? I offered, with casual sincerity. Not really, she said. I was not sure how to respond to not really. I didn't have other prepared topics. The only two things that I could come up with on the fly were, what are those tubes and needles for? And I also like cheesecake. Neither of these seemed like deathbed talk exactly. Fortunately, it turned out that Pat had no trouble coming up with things to talk about herself. How did the Karen Connection meeting go? She asked. Well, I hesitated. Things went a bit off topic. We do that, Pat said, laughing. At the time, I thought she meant my congregation, but I would come to learn that she means the entire religion. The trick is in how you set up the agenda, Pat told me. Let's go over it together for next meeting. And then we were off, with me drinking it up and completely forgetting to be supportive of Pat's journey into her final good night of the soul. Once we were done with business, Pat wanted to know about me, about how I'd found Unitarian Universalism, about my partner and his work, and if he was the kind of oncologist that had enough pull to change hospital policy so they would serve cheesecake instead of Ensure. And she wanted to know about the boys, how old they were, what they liked in school, how they were liking church so far. And she wanted to know about the wedding, the dress shopping, and the flowers. And how are the plans for the ceremony itself going? She asked eagerly. I looked down, suddenly embarrassed. Surely Pat was about to judge us. Gary and Maureen and I were in an unusual situation. Maureen and Gary were still married, and we had no plans to change this. Maureen's mental illness had left her permanently institutionalized. I had begun as a nanny to the family years ago, and Gary and I's relationship had become something more over time. This had happened with Maureen's blessing. She didn't want to be Gary to be without a live-in partner forever, and I was the stepmother she wanted for her children. But her mental health meant that she was convinced that getting a divorce would mean she would go to hell, and the idea of hell was very real and tangible to Maureen. And a divorce would have been a lie. Maureen was still a part of the family. We phoned, we visited, we kept what connection her health would allow us to. She didn't live with us, but not being able to live together doesn't make two people not married. Plenty of couples are forced into separate homes by health challenges. So there would be two wives, we decided. It seemed like the only loving option. Pat would have known at least some of this story already. We weren't hiding it, but this was she and I's first direct conversation about it. I stuttered awkwardly through my explanation with flushed cheeks. Pat would have been born in the 1930s or 40s, and I figured that she would have certain attitudes about non traditional relationships. I assumed a lot of things about Pat, actually, what she would need as a dying person, what she would think of my family and its choices. She, however, made no assumptions about me. As I told our story, Pat's face didn't look judgmental, it looked curious. So, who's officiating your ceremony? She asked conversationally. I shrank down further. We're doing it ourselves, I said. Do you want to officiate your own ceremony? She asked, tilting her head to the side. I did not. The whole point of the ceremony was to create a sense of permanency and legitimacy. After years of being unsure if I would disappear from underneath them, the boys needed me to stand up in a white dress and say once and for all, you have two mothers. We're a family, a real family, all of us. And we needed to explain to our extended community, too, that we were a family. We needed to take this strange creature that had been cobbled together out of tragedy and rejected in so many places and make that creature real. No minister was going to touch that, I figured. So we would do it ourselves. We would stand up there on our own, humiliatingly aware that there was nobody ready to stand beside us. Hand me the phone, Pat said, as I finished telling her about all this. I will call Tony. Tony was what we call a lay chaplain in Canada, which is a church member with the training and credentials to do rites of passage. You can meet with him, Pat said cheerfully, and see if you're interested in what he has to offer. Will he offer? I asked in a small voice. Love makes a family, Pat said firmly. It's kind of our thing. I did sort of know that. I mean, I'd seen the rainbow sticker on the door to the kids area that said, ask me about family values. I'd heard the words, whatever your faith, whatever your heritage, whomever you love, every Sunday morning. But I kind of figured that whomever you love was sort of code for it's okay to be gay. I didn't think they meant whomever that you love. Is it allowed to? I began again with growing hope. Who could stop us? Pat asked, grinning. I wasn't sure who could stop us. It wasn't clear who decided what was heresy in this religion full of heretics. This is what we do, Pat said, her voice filled with joy and pride as she dialed Tony's number from memory. This here is the whole point of it all. As she said this, she waved a hand in my direction in this sweeping gesture, rattling all the needles and tubes. I thought she was gesturing to us and our little ceremony. It would be much later that I would learn how much she was how much more she was talking about. All the families, the traditional ones and the unusual ones and all the ones in between. The ones with or without kids, with or without partners. The ones made out of knitting clubs and the networks of friendships formed in gay bars. It was a hand sweep that just gestured not just to families, but all the ways we connect. These connections, every last one of them, are the point of it all the things that love makes. That was more than 20 years ago. It would be years before I would learn the term polyamorous, which refers to people who have multiple romantic relationships simultaneously. It would be many years before I would learn to express, as I can now, how my polyamorous identity is deeply interwoven with my Unitarian Universalist one. I think about relationships using the tools that UUism has given me. Honesty, a willingness to re-examine what you have been taught, a focus on respect and consent, careful attention to the way we are connected and how one person's actions affect another person's feelings. To me, these are polyamorous values, even though the exact same values might lead someone else to monogamy. Like with so many parts of our lives, our shared tools can sometimes lead us to very different places, which is okay and great even. I had none of this language when I was stumbling through my conversation with Pat, but I didn't need it. She didn't need it. She had love makes a family, which turned out to be all the language she needed. If you ask me about family values, I will tell you about Pat as matriarch and how she set the tone for my family's life within my congregation. I will tell you about how the cumulative impact I will tell you about the cumulative impact of years of being loved and accepted by your faith community. I will tell you about the impact on my children of having all three of their parents welcomed at church without qualification at a time when polyamory was something most people had not heard of. If you ask me about family values, I will tell you it's not just about what happens inside families, but also what happens around them, about growing with your children inside a cradle of love and support. And if you ask me about the beginnings of my journey as a Unitarian Universalist, I will not tell you about the membership ceremony where I signed the book. I don't actually remember that moment. Instead, I remember this moment with Pat, with her lying in the hospital bed, tubes running in and out of her body, gesturing for the phone to call Tony, looking for all the world like a cross between a spaceman, a church lady, and a mob boss. And looking, by the way, not remotely like the dying old lady that I had planned for her to be. In her final days, Pat did more than protect our family by virtue of her blessing. She also taught me how to be a UU. She taught me the value of centering love and staying curious. She modeled how to engage without making assumptions when something is new. And when I made assumptions about her, anyways, based on her being an older lady and one at the end of her life, she modeled how to ignore the assumptions of others when they do not suit you. Pat ended her life how she chose to, half running her church from her hospital bed, holding ground for the values she believed in. Love makes a family. Full stop, no qualifications. They said, whomever you love, and they meant it. That was the moment I really became a Unitarian Universalist.